The first thing people noticed about Daniel Carter wasn't his smile, though he had one of those warm, easy grins that could put anyone at ease. It wasn't even the oven he had built in his backyard, a brick structure he laid by hand, with the patience of a craftsman. No, the first thing anyone noticed was the smell. Every morning, just as the sun began to rise, the aroma of baking bread drifted through the neighborhood. It floated down the cul-de-sac, past manicured lawns and trimmed hedges, weaving its way into kitchens and open windows. It was a smell that carried memories of family tables, of comfort, of home. Daniel had moved into the neighborhood only 6 months earlier. A widower in his late 30s, he had left the bustle of the city behind, hoping for a quieter life where he could continue his passion for baking. He didn't open a shop on Main Street or rent out a bakery downtown. Instead, he built his oven in the corner of his own yard, just a few steps from his back door, and decided to share his bread with whoever wanted it. At first, neighbors were curious. They stopped by the fence to peek at the brick oven, still new and glowing faintly from its first firings. Daniel welcomed them with loaves, soft white batons wrapped in paper, golden baguettes with crisp edges, and sweet rolls glazed with honey. The smiles came quickly. Soon, people were showing up not just out of curiosity, but with money in hand. "Could I get 2 of those tomorrow?" Mrs. Alvarez from across the street asked one morning, her arms already full of groceries. A teenager from down the block shyly requested a sourdough for his parents' anniversary dinner. And every Saturday, children gathered, waiting for Daniel to hand out little rolls sprinkled with cinnamon sugar. The oven became more than a tool. It became a hearth for the whole neighborhood. People lingered longer in his yard, sipping coffee, chatting, and laughing as they waited for fresh loaves. For many, Daniel's bread wasn't just food. It was comfort, a reminder that kindness and warmth could be baked into something simple. What Daniel didn't know, what he couldn't yet imagine, was that not everyone welcomed the smell of fresh bread drifting through their perfect suburban air. And one neighbor in particular would soon decide that his oven was not a gift to the community, but a violation that needed to be destroyed. Her name was Karen Whitfield. It wasn't long before Karen Whitfield made her displeasure known. Karen was the self-appointed guardian of the neighborhood's standards. As president of the Homeowners Association, she prided herself on maintaining pristine lawns, matching mailboxes, and a spotless sense of order. Any deviation, no matter how small, was quickly met with one of her famous compliance notices. So when she caught her first whiff of Daniel Carter's bread drifting across her freshly fertilized lawn, she did not breathe it in with delight. She wrinkled her nose. Unprofessional, she thought. Inappropriate. Not what this neighborhood is meant to be. At the next HOA meeting, Karen seized her moment. The members gathered in the community center, folding chairs in neat rows, pitchers of water sweating on the plastic table, and Karen stood tall at the front with her clipboard in hand. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice sharp, "we need to discuss a very serious matter. One of our residents has installed an outdoor brick oven, an unsanctioned structure, and he's been selling bread from it. This is not a bakery district. This is a residential community. If we allow this to continue, what's next? Food trucks parked on every lawn? Street vendors under our windows?" A few neighbors shifted uncomfortably. Some nodded in agreement, not out of conviction, but habit. They were used to agreeing with Karen. Others hesitated, recalling the warm bread Daniel had handed them only a week before. "I, for one, will not tolerate our neighborhood being turned into a marketplace," Karen declared, jabbing her pen like a sword. "That oven is a violation of HOA standards, and it must be removed immediately." A murmur spread through the room. Mrs. Alvarez raised her hand timidly. "But Karen, his bread is wonderful, and he shares it with everyone. It's hardly—" Karen cut her off. "That's not the point. Rules are rules. We cannot make exceptions. Today it's bread. Tomorrow it's— who knows? We'll be overrun with chaos." Mr. Green, a quiet older man, spoke up. "I don't see chaos. I see neighbors gathering. I see community. Frankly, I haven't spoken to half the folks on this street until Daniel's oven brought us together." That comment earned a round of murmured agreement. Karen's jaw tightened. She slammed her clipboard down. Then it seems I'll have to take this matter into my own hands. As the meeting adjourned, neighbors filed out whispering. Some felt uneasy about crossing Karen, but others were quietly resolved. They weren't about to give up the bread that had become part of their mornings. Daniel, sitting in the back of the room, remained silent. He had heard every word. He knew what was coming. And though he had built his oven to bring people joy, it was now about to put him at the center of a fight he never asked for. Within a week of the HOA meeting, the letters began to arrive. The first came folded neatly in an envelope marked with the HOA's seal. Daniel slid it open carefully, hoping perhaps it was some sort of warning he could reason with. Instead, it read in bold, "You are in violation of HOA policy regarding unapproved structures. Remove the brick oven within 14 days, or face daily fines." He sighed, setting the letter aside on the kitchen counter. 2 days later, another notice arrived. This one was sharper. Failure to comply will result in additional penalties, including potential legal action. The oven must be dismantled immediately. And then came a third, delivered not by mail, but by Karen herself, who appeared at his gate with her clipboard. She didn't bother with pleasantries. "You've been warned," she said, eyes cold. "If that oven isn't gone by the end of the month, we'll sue. This neighborhood has rules for a reason." Daniel met her gaze calmly. "The oven doesn't hurt anyone, Karen. People come together because of it. They share bread, stories, laughter, things this neighborhood could use more of." Karen's lips curled into a thin smile. "This isn't about bread, Mr. Carter. It's about order, and I won't have you making a mockery of it." Despite the threats, neighbors continued to stop by. Some came in the mornings for warm loaves, others in the evenings to buy baguettes for dinner. Children still gathered eagerly for sweet rolls sprinkled with sugar. But now, many lingered longer, speaking in hushed tones. "They're trying to shut you down, aren't they?" Mrs. Alvarez asked one evening, clutching a loaf to her chest. Daniel nodded. "They've threatened fines, even court." She looked around, then straightened her back. "Then, they'll have to fight us, too." In the days that followed, Daniel began to notice quiet acts of defiance from his neighbors. A young couple left a note in his mailbox. "We'll cover any fines. Don't stop baking." Someone else dropped off flour and yeast at his door, supplies to keep him going. Still, the pressure grew. Karen had rallied enough board members to approve escalating fines, and Daniel received notice of hundreds of dollars owed. One afternoon, a city inspector showed up at his door with a clipboard, apologetic but firm. "I've been asked to review your oven for violations." Daniel watched the man circle the oven, tapping notes onto his sheet. He felt a knot in his stomach. Would this be the end? But as he looked past the inspector, he saw neighbors gathering at the fence, 10, 20, 30 of them, watching silently, their faces set with determination. It was no longer just his fight. The HOA could threaten fines, Karen could wave her clipboard. But the people had tasted Daniel's bread, and more than that, they had tasted the community it created, and they weren't going to let it go so easily. The morning after the inspector's visit, Daniel opened his door to find a petition taped to the front of his oven. Across the top, in bold letters, someone had written, "Save our bread. Save our neighbor." Beneath it were signatures, dozens of them. Mrs. Alvarez, Mr. Green, the Thompsons, even the shy teenager from down the street who had once asked for sourdough for his parents' anniversary dinner. Daniel picked up the paper with trembling hands. More signatures had been added in the margins, and on the back, someone had written, "This oven belongs to all of us." That evening, neighbors began gathering in his yard, not just for bread, but for solidarity. Families brought folding chairs, children drew chalk hearts on the driveway, and someone set up a long folding table covered with casseroles, salads, and pies. It was no longer a simple transaction of bread for coins. It was a community meal. "This is what they want to tear down?" Mr. Green said, biting into a piece of warm baguette. "They'll have to drag me out of here first." Mrs. Alvarez stood and addressed the group. "We've let Karen and the HOA push us around for too long, but Daniel's oven has given us something we didn't even know we were missing, each other. We can't let them take it away." The crowd erupted in applause. Word of the gathering spread quickly. Soon, people from neighboring blocks began walking over, curious about the backyard bakery that had united the street. On Saturdays, Daniel's yard looked more like a festival than a suburban lawn, music playing from a neighbor's speaker, children running with sticky fingers, the scent of bread filling the air like a promise. Karen, of course, fumed. She drove by slowly, glaring from behind the wheel of her immaculate SUV. Once, she even stopped, rolling down her window to shout, "You're breaking the rules! This will not stand!" But the crowd only laughed, raising their loaves in mock salute. "Long live the oven!" someone shouted, and the chant caught on until Karen sped away in a fury. Meanwhile, Daniel tried to stay grounded. Though grateful, he worried. "They can fine me into bankruptcy," he admitted quietly to Mrs. Alvarez one evening. "And if they take me to court," she laid a hand on his arm, "then we'll go to court with you. Every last one of us." And so it was decided. The oven was no longer Daniel's alone. It was the heart of the neighborhood. And if Karen and the HOA wanted to destroy it, they would have to face not one man, but an entire community bound together by bread. The case of Carter versus the Maplewood HOA drew more attention than anyone expected. By the time the court date arrived, the small-town courthouse was packed to the brim. Neighbors crowded the benches, spilling into the aisles, while more waited outside with signs reading, "Save the Oven" and "Bread Builds Community." Inside, Daniel sat quietly at the defendant's table, his hands folded, his jaw tight. He had never been in a courtroom before. But when he looked back and saw rows upon rows of his neighbors, Mrs. Alvarez, the Thompsons, Mr. Green, even children clutching notebooks filled with drawings of baguettes and loaves, his heart steadied. He wasn't alone. Karen sat across the room, immaculate in a pearl necklace and pressed suit, her lawyer by her side. She wore the confident expression of someone certain the rules were on her side. When the judge entered, she lifted her chin, ready to win. Her lawyer began striding toward the front. "Your Honor, this case is straightforward. Mr. Carter has built an unapproved structure in violation of HOA bylaws. He uses it for commercial purposes, which is strictly prohibited in residential zones. We ask that the court uphold these rules and order the immediate removal of the oven." Karen nodded along with every word, occasionally glancing toward the spectators with a smirk. Then, Daniel's lawyer stood. "Your Honor," he began, "the HOA claims this is a matter of rules. But what this case truly asks is, what are communities for? Mr. Carter's oven is not a nuisance. It is not a business in the disruptive sense. It is a gathering place, a symbol of care, and a source of nourishment, not only for the stomach, but for the spirit of this neighborhood." He gestured to the crowd. "Dozens of residents have come today to tell you themselves. They are not here to complain. They are here because they do not want to lose something precious." Witnesses were called. Mrs. Alvarez spoke first, her voice trembling but fierce. "That oven has brought joy into my life. My grandchildren run to Mr. Carter's yard every weekend. We talk to our neighbors now. Before the bread, we barely knew each other." Mr. Green followed. "I've lived on that street 30 years. It was quiet, cold even. Now, it feels alive again. I haven't seen community like this in decades." Even a teenager testified. "Mr. Carter gave me a sourdough for my parents' anniversary dinner. It was the first time in years I saw them smile together. His bread makes people happy. Isn't that what neighborhoods should be about?" The judge listened intently, taking notes. Finally, Karen herself asked to speak. She rose dramatically, her voice sharp as glass. "Your Honor, this is getting out of hand. These people may enjoy the bread, but that does not change the facts. Rules exist for a reason. If we let him keep this oven, what's next? Food carts? Outdoor markets? The entire character of the neighborhood will be ruined. This is not about bread. It's about control." Her words echoed, cold and rigid. The contrast between her and the heartfelt testimonies before was stark. When the testimonies concluded, the judge leaned back in his chair, thoughtful. The gavel rested loosely in his hand. This is more than a question of bylaws, he said slowly. This is a question of humanity, and that we will address in my ruling. The tension in the room rose like heat from a fire. Daniel exhaled deeply, clutching his notebook of recipes as though it were a shield. The verdict would come soon. The courtroom was so quiet that the scratch of the judge's pen sounded like thunder. Everyone leaned forward, waiting. Daniel's heart thudded in his chest. Karen sat stiffly, arms crossed, her pearl necklace gleaming under the fluorescent lights, as if already certain of her victory. Finally, the judge set his papers aside and lifted his gaze. I have heard the arguments. The HOA has presented clear evidence that Mr. Carter's oven is technically in violation of the association's bylaws. The rules are written plainly. He paused, and Karen allowed herself a smug smile. But, the judge continued, his voice firm, this case is not simply about bricks and mortar. It is about the effect of one neighbor's actions on the life of an entire community. And in this courtroom, I have heard no testimony of disruption, no proof of danger, no evidence of harm. What I have heard are voices of unity. Stories of neighbors who were strangers before Mr. B. Carter's oven gave them reason to gather. I have heard about joy, about healing, about community. Karen's smile faltered. The judge leaned forward. Rules exist to maintain peace. But peace is not simply silence or order. It is also connection, kindness, and humanity. When rules are applied so rigidly that they strip a community of those things, then the spirit of the law is lost. He raised his gavel. Therefore, this court rules in favor of Mr. Carter. The oven may remain. The fines are nullified. And I strongly urge the HOA to reconsider how it enforces its bylaws, lest it forget that neighborhoods are meant to be lived in, not policed into sterility. The gavel came down with a sharp crack. Case dismissed. The courtroom erupted. Cheers burst from every bench, neighbors hugging, children clapping and stomping their feet. Some even began chanting Daniel's name. He sat frozen for a moment, the weight of relief sinking into him before standing to embrace Mrs. Alvarez, who was weeping tears of joy. Karen, red-faced and trembling with fury, stormed out of the courtroom, muttering under her breath. No one followed her. Outside, the crowd spilled into the steps of the courthouse, laughter and celebration echoing into the afternoon. For the first time since the ordeal began, Daniel smiled freely. His oven was safe, not just because of the ruling, but because his neighbors had chosen him. But the true celebration, he knew, was still to come. The Saturday after the court's decision, the neighborhood transformed. What had once been a quiet cul-de-sac became a street alive with color, sound, and joy. Folding tables lined the sidewalks, draped with checkered cloths. Children taped up hand-painted signs that read, "Bread Day" and "Thank you, Daniel." Banners stretched from one porch to another, swaying in the warm afternoon breeze. At the center of it all stood Daniel's brick oven, glowing softly with heat as loaves baked inside. The aroma drifted through the air, richer and sweeter than ever before. This time, it wasn't tinged with worry. It was celebration. Neighbors arrived carrying dishes of their own, jams, soups, roasted meats, salads. They piled everything onto the long tables, turning Daniel's bread into the centerpiece of a community feast. Children darted between the tables, laughing as they carried warm rolls in their little hands. Mrs. Alvarez, beaming with pride, handed out plates to newcomers. Mr. Green tuned his old guitar and strummed a lively melody. Families from neighboring streets wandered in, curious, and were immediately welcomed with slices of fresh sourdough or sweet cinnamon bread. "Long live the oven!" someone shouted, and the crowd repeated it with laughter, raising their loaves like a toast. As Daniel handed out baguettes, one after another, his heart swelled. He had never sought recognition, only to share the simple joy of bread. But looking at the sea of smiling faces, he realized the oven had become something larger than himself. It wasn't just his dream anymore. It was theirs, too. A group of children presented him with a handmade plaque, cardboard wrapped in foil, with words written in bright marker, To Mr. Carter, the heart of our neighborhood. Daniel's eyes stung as he accepted it, holding it as carefully as if it were made of gold. As evening fell, lanterns flickered to life along the fences, and the music grew softer. People sat shoulder to shoulder, breaking bread, telling stories, laughing under the stars. Daniel leaned against his oven, tired but smiling, watching it all unfold. The HOA had tried to take his oven away, but instead, it had united the neighborhood more strongly than ever. And from that day forward, whenever the smell of bread drifted through the streets of Maplewood, it carried with it not just the promise of food, but the memory of how a community chose warmth and humanity over cold, rigid rules. The oven had not just survived, it had become a symbol,